Section 12 of the Golden Porch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Beeswax Candle. The Golden Porch by W.M.L. Hutchinson. The Lad with One Sandal. Chapter 1. There was a king in the olden time whose name was Peleus, and he dwelt in the fair harbour town of Iolcos, ruling a folk that were famous seafarers from the beginning. A bold man was he and a crafty, but he went ever in fear of his life, for he had an ill deed on his conscience, and his sleep of nights was broken by dreams which boded a bitter reckoning for the same. Many and many a time he awoke with a shriek, as a dagger seemed to touch his throat. But the dream shape that brandished it was dim and wavering, and he could never descry the countenance of that phantom foe. At last he sent a trusty messenger to the holy place of Delphi, where Apollo reveals hidden things to mortals by the mouth of his priestess, to ask the interpretation of the vision. For he thought, if I can but learn what man it is whose wraith appears to me, I shall make short work with him, and rid myself of this dread in which I live. The messenger returned, and brought this answer from the god. Let Peleus know that the doom he dreams of will come from the hand of a near kinsman. I bid him beware, above all else, of the man who comes to him wearing one sandal, whether he be a stranger or born and bred in Iolcos. When King Peleus heard this message, his blood froze with fear. It was indeed death, then, that the dreams foreboded. Yet it was some comfort that now at least he had a sign whereby to know when the danger drew near, and he still hoped that he might forestall it if he kept good watch. So he set guards day and night about his palace, and watchmen at all the city gates, and gave strict charge to them all to bring him instant warning if they should ever see a man with one sandal. And as time went on, his heart grew somewhat lightened of its dread, for there was no such comer seen, and the evil dreams ceased to visit him. But he that was foretold came in his destined hour to Iolcos, out of the mountains to the northward, and stood in the marketplace while it was yet morning, and the throng of folk was greatest. The watchmen at the gate had seen him pass, but they paid no heed to one who seemed a mere lad, and by his dress a hunter from the hill country. This youth carried 2 hunting spears, and instead of a cloak, a leopard's skin hung from his shoulders, above a close-fitting tunic. His head was uncovered, and his long curls flamed golden red in the sunlight. It was easy to guess, from the shy and wondering glances he cast about him, that he was new to the sights of the city, yet he bore himself with the noble grace of a king's son. And as he stood there silent, many eyes were drawn to the beauty of his face and his stature, lofty as a god's. Men began to whisper to one another, asking who the stranger was, and when none could answer, a murmur went to and fro among the crowd that one of the immortals was come among them. So might Apollo look, they muttered, or the mailed warrior Ares, fair and terrible. Surely this is some god, or the son of a god. Nay, friends, said some of the old men, the gods come not thus in the sight of multitudes. Rather we should guess this mighty youth to be of that old race of the earth-born giants. But they all have perished long since, and only their huge graves are left for a witness to our days. Now while the folks talked thus under their breaths, and durst not for reverence question the godlike stranger, a man of the king's household gazed with the rest, and marked on a sudden that he wore but the one sandal. For it chanced, as the youth crossed the ford of a mountain stream on his way to the city, that its fellow slipped from his foot and was carried away by the torrent. Quickly did that henchman bring word to the palace, and at his tidings King Peleus came in hot haste to the marketplace, urging the swift mules of his ivory car to their utmost speed. "Way there for the king!" cried the slaves who ran beside him, and he drew rein in a cleared space, whence all the people had drawn back for his coming, save the stranger lad only. Peleus scanned him eagerly, and his soul sickened with affright as he saw the dreaded token of the single sandal on his right foot. But he cloaked the fear within him with haughty words, and said, eyeing the lad disdainfully, "Stranger, what country do you call home? What grey-haired carline of low degree mothered such a dainty pet? Come, speak out your parentage, and disgrace it not with detested lying." Then the youth, undaunted, yet with gentlest courtesy, made reply, "It is mine, rather, to render such answer as shall not disgrace the great Chiron, my teacher. For my home has been in his mountain cave, and I had my rearing from the virtuous wife and mother of that wise centaur. 20 years have I numbered in the care of these foster parents, and never yet done dishonour to their upbringing by deceitful act or word. But now I am come again to my own native land, to claim the ancient rights that were my father's, which Peleus, as I hear, holds in unlawful possession, even this kingdom of Iolcos."
"Do you call yourself, then, the son of Aeson?" cried the king, "who ruled this land until a better took it from him? Who knows not that his only child died at its birth?"
"Not so, for I am that child," answered the stranger. "But when Peleus, moved by reckless desires, had overthrown his kinsman King Aeson with force and fraud, then for fear of that violent oppressor, my parents feigned that their newborn son was dead, and made great mourning with all their household. Then, at dead of night, they sent me privily out of the city, a babe wrapped in swaddling bands of royal crimson, and at their bidding faithful friends conveyed me to Chiron's cave, where I might be reared in safety. And Jason was the name by which that twine-natured being was wont to call me. Such in brief is my story. And now, good townsman, since you know me for your countryman, come back to his own city. Which of you will show me the ancient house of my fathers, that I know not, though I was born here?" Before Jason made an end of speaking, King Peleus turned his mules and drove at a furious pace back to the palace. He knew that the folk held him in secret hate because he had dethroned Aeson, that gentle king, and he feared lest they should rise against him then and there when they heard the lad with one sandal declare himself their rightful prince. But Jason also hurried from the marketplace, eagerly following a band of willing guides. One thing he had not found courage to ask of a company of strangers, and would wait to learn within the doors of his home, was his father yet alive. Chiron had told him nothing of the old man's fate, only had bidden him to go to Iolcos and claim his heritage from the usurper. Now when he was come to the house and entered through its pillared porch, he crossed a wide courtyard, empty and silent, where grass was springing from the cracked pavement of marble, and in the hall beyond it he saw no one but an aged man, wrapped in a faded mantle, sitting in a low chair beside the embers of the hearth. The once lordly chamber was bare of furnishing. Dust lay thick upon the floor, and cobwebs, where rich hangings should have been, drooped curtain-wise from lintel and cornice. The home the youth had come to seemed a house of the dead, deserted save for that motionless figure cowering over the dying fire. But as he moved towards it, the snow-white head turned slowly, the dim eyes looked him in the face, and a trembling voice ran through the silence. "My son! My son!" Jason sprang to the old king, for he indeed it was, and clasped him to his breast, while tears of joy fell fast from those withered eyelids. It was long before Aeson could find words, in the rapture of beholding his son, come back to him the fairest and goodliest of men. But he told at last how Peleus had stripped him little by little of all he possessed, on this pretext or that, till neither broad lands, nor flocks and herds, nor the rich treasures of his house were left. And he himself, with the few old slaves that tended him for love, lived on the secret doles of his well-wishers among the citizens. "How comes it, my father," asked Jason, "that your 2 brethren have suffered you to be so evilly entreated of this tyrant, seeing that each of them is a king in his own country, if indeed they yet live?" "They live and prosper," answered his father. "But it is far from hence to where they dwell, and they begrudge to waste blood and treasure in the cause of a feeble old man that cannot have long to live. But word will quickly reach them that you are home again, and when they hear what manner of young man their brother's son has become, I am much mistaken, or they will think his cause worth battling for. Be you patient till we have news of them, for it comes in my mind that we shall shortly see either them or the princes, your cousins."
The old king was a true prophet, and before many days so swiftly spread the rumour of Jason's return, those two brethren and their sons came to greet him at Iolcos. The name of one was Pheres, and his son was called Admetus. These two were men of gracious and winning presence, speaking words of pleasantness, but their souls within them were little and mean. Amithaon, the other brother, was king in the far southwest. He had a name for wisdom, but the son he brought with him had yet a greater in the after time. For he was that Melampus, of whom you may read in the tale of the prince who was a seer. Jason and his father made these kinsmen right welcome, though their hearts misgave them for the bareness of their ancient dwelling, and for the wherewithal to feast the princes and their following. But at the first word that Aeson's kinsmen were come to visit him, the townsfolk rejoiced openly, because at last strong helpers had appeared for the oppressed king, and they feared not to make their gladness and goodwill manifest by bringing him gifts in abundance of everything needful to entertain his guests. Such store of sheep and oxen, of corn and wine and oil, of tables, couches, vessels of every sort, and all manner of household stuffs, as was gathered that day in Aeson's courtyard, had not been seen within its gates for many a long year. Moreover, the wealthier citizens sent their house thralls, both men and maids, by the score, to grind the corn, to bake and dress meat for the banquet, and to serve the king and his kinsfolk in the hall. So that night there was feasting and good cheer, torchlight and merry stir in the house that had so long been silent and deserted. Now Jason had the charge of all, and gave command as master, because of his father's great age and infirmity, and carried himself as a princely host should do, overlooking no point of courtesy, so that it was a marvel to his guests how he had come by these manners in the cave of a centaur. For they knew not noble Chiron, who in the after-time reared Prince Peleus in the like gracious ways, and compassed for him his marriage with the sea-king's daughter, as I have told already. Then, to do his kinsmen all honour, Jason feasted them with the best for 5 days and 5 nights, saying no word of the matter he had at heart, but tasting in their company the delicious joy of life at its sweetest. But on the 6th day he began to speak of graver things, and when he had opened all his mind to them, they gave full consent to that which he declared it his purpose now to do. And rising all together from the banquet, they followed him forthwith to the house of Peleus. At the sound of their voices in his hall, King Peleus came hastily from the inner chambers to meet them, and then, with fair flowing speech of gentle tone, Jason spoke thus: "Son of a mighty sire, over quick are mortals to barter justice for the wages of iniquity, forgetting that the hour of reckoning must overtake them soon or late. But it well beseems both you and me to rule our hearts aright, and take thought what shall bring us good in days to come. Call to remembrance, I pray you, that your fathers and mine were of one blood, and that the divine dispensers of weal and woe to men turn their faces from the sight of feuds between kindred. Let there be neither strife nor drawing of swords between us two, to make division of the great inheritance of our forefathers. For if you will follow my counsel, it shall not need. See now, I freely yield the rich lands, and all the goodly flocks and herds of which you have despoiled the old man my father. Little care I for the wealth these bring into your house. Only do you on your part restore me the sceptre that was Aeson's, and the kingly seat where he gave judgment to his people. These, I say, yield up and grudge me not, lest a worse thing come of it." Now Peleus was no ways minded to give up the kingship, even though he might keep all the fatness of the land for his own,
and besides, he was utterly purposed to destroy the lad with the one sandal, because of the oracle he had heard concerning him. While Jason was yet speaking, his swift and cunning mind devised a plan for his undoing. And he answered with a show of mildness in these words, "Behold, I will deal according to your pleasure in all things. But I am now stricken in years, and you are in the flower of your youth. Therefore it is for you to undertake a certain task what else were mine. Hear now what it is, since you seek to be head over all our kindred, for the matter touches him most nearly who is chief of our house. There was a prince of our blood, Cadmus by name, whose wife died, and left him with 2 young children, and in no long time he wedded another. Now the second bride proved a cruel stepdame, and when sons were born to her, she plotted death for Phrixus, the eldest born of the first wife, that her own children might inherit the kingdom. She caused all the seed sown in the land to be secretly poisoned, and when many that ate the corn sickened and died, she brought her husband to believe that the gods had sent a pestilence on the people, which must be stayed by some great sacrifice. Then did she bribe a wicked seer to declare that the wrath of the gods could be turned away by no other victim than the king's firstborn son. But when the boy Phrixus was laid on the altar stone, and the knife upraised to slay him, the gods delivered him out of her hands in wondrous wise. For a ram with curly fleece of gold stood suddenly on the altar, and while all shrank back amazed, the boy threw himself upon its back, and it rose with him into the air. Over land and sea it flew, till it brought him to the country of the Colchians, in the unknown regions far northward. And there, by divine bidding, he sacrificed it to Ares, god of the land, and hung its golden fleece on a tree of his sacred grove. But that fleece of gold was the bane of the hapless youth not long after, for the king of the Colchians put him to death, only to possess the marvellous thing. And now, O Jason, I would have you go to yonder land, and take the golden fleece from the keeping of that savage king, since I am given to know that our murdered kinsman's spirit cannot rest until this be done. Yes, such is the message his unquiet ghost has sent me in a dream. And when I sought counsel of the god at Delphi, answer came from the place of prophecy, that I should straightway launch a ship to sail on the hallowed quest. This quest then do you pledge yourself to follow in my stead, and I will swear a solemn oath, making Zeus my witness, to yield you the kingdom." Now all the tale Peleus told concerning Phrixus was true, but as for the dream and the message from Delphi, they were falsehoods cunningly devised to send Jason on a quest wherein he should surely perish. But the youth neither knew guile in his own heart, nor looked for it in another. So he made the covenant that Peleus asked, and took leave of him, filled with eagerness to achieve so strange an adventure. Then forthwith he sent out heralds to proclaim everywhere that he was bound on a perilous voyage, and would make all welcome to sail along with him who loved danger and renown better than to dwell at home in ignoble safety. At those tidings, high-hearted sons of kings gathered to Iolcos from far and near, for Queen Hera filled their hearts with keen desire to be Jason's shipmates, because she favoured him above all mortals from the day he came to the city to his life's end. And this was the reason. When he came to the ford where he lost his sandal, he saw an old beggar woman sitting on the bank, crying and bewailing herself because she could not cross the rain-swollen stream. Jason spoke kindly to her, and though she was both ragged and dirty, he took her up in his arms and carried her over. No sooner had he set her down again than her bent and shrunken form was changed into that of a fair woman in her prime, and her rags into shining raiment, and she said to him, "For this good deed, count me your friend forever." Thereupon she vanished from his sight, and he went on his way with gladness, knowing that one of the immortals had appeared to him in this shape. Now the beggar woman was Hera, who was wandering that day on earth to see what kindness mortals would show to one so feeble and wretched. So the flower of all the heroes who then lived came to the house of Aeson, making offer to sail with Jason on the quest. The first who came were two noble youths in armour of gleaming silver. So like were they that none might know one from the other, and their silver chariot was drawn by horses white as snow. These were the twin brothers, Castor and Polydeuces, who for the great love they bore each other were never parted their lives long, nor did even death sunder them at the last. The next comer had neither chariot nor shining armour, but trudged on foot, carrying a great bow and quiver with a tawny lion's skin girt about his sinewy sun-browned limbs. He was a man in the prime of life, of gallant bearing, though without height or comeliness of person, and he passed unremarked through the crowd that were drawn to Jason's door to gaze on those glorious twins. But they, when they saw him stand within the hall, rose up in deepest reverence as at the coming of a god, and Jason also, for he knew by the lion's skin and bow that this was Heracles himself. Much had he heard from Chiron of that great helper of men, and he gazed with awe and wonder on him who had done such mighty deeds by land and sea. But now came into the hall a young minstrel clad in flowing robe of white, with a chaplet of ivy on his fair hair. "I also, Jason," he said, "would fain be of your crew, though I have no weapon but this harp of mine. I am Orpheus of Thrace, come hither at Apollo's bidding, that your brave company may not lack for the minstrelsy warriors love so well." Right gladly did the princes there assembled welcome that sweet singer, whose fame was gone out into all lands. Of him it was told that beasts and birds, nay, the trees and rocks of the Thracian mountains, would follow the sound of his enchanting lyre. It were long to tell what other heroes of ancient story mustered in Jason's hall that day, but none were so wondrous to behold as the last comers, Zetes and Calais, sons of the north wind, who had bright feathered wings waving from their shoulders. Meanwhile, the most skilled craftsmen of Iolcos had wrought busily under Jason's watchful eye at the building of his ship. The tallest pines on Mount Pelion, whose woody top overhung the cave of Chiron, had been felled for her masts and timbers, and her 50 stout oars were hewn from giant ash trees. When all was finished and the good ship lay ready for launching, her young captain summoned his new comrades to the harbour, and said to them, "Here, noble friends, is the bark that will carry us to the far Colchian land, well found with all we need for the long voyage." Then all the heroes clapped their hands at sight of the ship, and they called her Argo, that is to say, the Swift. And now Jason called upon Mopsos, the seer, that dwelt in Iolcos, to offer sacrifice to Zeus, and entreat him for favourable signs at their setting forth, which the god granted both by the omens of the altar and by the lucky fall of lots that the seer cast to tell their fortunes. So that wise soothsayer bade them embark with all speed, for the hour was propitious for their sailing. But a greater sign followed, for when all were come aboard, and the anchors were raised on either side the prow, Jason stood up beside the helm, holding a golden cup in his hands, and poured wine therefrom into the sea, calling aloud on Zeus, lord of the lightning, on winds and waves, and knights of seafaring, to be gracious to their outgoing and their homecoming. Immediately a peal of thunder gave answer from the clouds above, and lightning flashes were seen to the right of the ship, cheering the hearts of all with happiest augury. At that the seer bade the princely comrades betake them to their oars, and their mighty strokes bore the Argo swiftly out to sea. All that day, and many a day after, they rowed on untiringly, sped along by the strong south breeze that filled their sails. 50 all told were those sailors, sons of gods and of kings, but none of Jason's kindred was among them, except only the brave Acastus, son of Peleus, who, for all his father could say, would not be turned from the quest of the golden fleece. So they fared ever northward, keeping in view the bays and promontories of the western mainland, till they had need of fresh water, and put into a wooded cove, where a stream ran sparkling to the sea. And here misfortune befell them, for they lost Heracles, the best of their crew. They had followed him to Iolcos, a fair lad called Hylas, who served him as cupbearer. This boy, for his dauntless spirit and the love Heracles had to him, was made one of the Argo's crew, and he disembarked in this place with the rest. But while they drew water from the stream, he wandered along its banks into the woods, till he came to its source in a deep, clear pool. As he bent over its cool depths, the water fairies who abode therein fell in love with his beauty, and before he was aware, they threw their white arms about him and drew him under. Hylas gave one cry for help as the water closed over him, and Heracles, who heard and knew the well-loved voice, rushed to find him, but in vain. Nor, though the hero and his comrades searched the woods the livelong day, could they see or hear aught of the vanished lad. Then, when morning dawned again, Heracles bade the others delay no longer from their journey. "But I," said he, "must tarry, for I will never leave this place till I know what has become of Hylas." Sadly, Jason and the rest took farewell of their great companion. Their hearts were sore for his grief, but they might not linger, and so once more they stood out to sea with oar and sail. Now after that they came to a long strait to the sea, and on the shore of it there was an old blind man sitting at a table, who seemed to be weeping. "Let us draw into land," said Jason, "and ask that old man what he does in this solitary place, and what may be his sorrow." So they brought Argo close into the shelving shore, and called to him, asking who he was. The old man turned his sightless eyes upon them, and answered, "I am Phineus, the seer, of all men most miserable. Apollo in my youth bestowed on me the power of prophecy, whereby I came to great honour, and my house was filled with rich gifts from the people who sought me for soothsay. But I offended the holy gods by greed of gain. Therefore in mine age they sent blindness upon me, and a strange evil, the like of which never came upon mortal man. For whenever I sat at meat, two monstrous birds with heads of women darted screeching upon my food, and snatched it away before I could taste one morsel, leaving but fragments dropped from their foul talons. They were in sight like vultures that prey on carcasses, and the deadly carrion smell of them polluted all they touched, and all the air of the house, so that none could endure to abide therein. And at last the men of my city thrust me forth because of those noisome guests, but that they might still resort to me for prophecies, they builded me a hut on this lonely shore, and daily bring me offerings of choice dainties such as I love. But woe's me! Those fell-winged creatures cease not to haunt me, as you will shortly see." "Old man," said Jason, "our hearts are moved with pity for your wretched lot. Tell us now, by your divine foresight, shall none rid you of this strange pest?" "Concerning that," said Phineus, "only this much is revealed to me. My deliverers are even now aboard this your ship, O son of Aeson, and bound for the far Colchian land. I know you, prince, and your errand, and who your comrades are. But which of them shall rescue me, and in what hour, is hidden from my ken." While they talked thus, certain men came thither from the city, bearing baskets of rich viands, which they spread on the old man's table. And he put forth his hands to take of them. Instantly, with hideous screams, two vulture shapes, women-headed, swooped down from upper air, seized upon the food, and soared away swifter than an arrow's flight. And the air was filled with a poisonous savour of decay, so that Jason and his comrades were fain to push off their ship from their tainted shore. But Phineus cried to them with tears not to abandon him in his helpless plight, and they talked with him from Argo's deck, and Jason asked him how the dire monsters were called. "By mortals," he answered, "they are called the Harpies, that is, the Snatchers. But the gods named them the Hounds of Zeus. You have seen their swiftness, how it is such that neither javelin nor arrow may overtake them. Alas, what could Heracles himself avail me, were he yet with you?" Then said Jason, "I know a way. And he filled a trencher with food, and bade the 2 sons of the north wind carry it ashore, and set it before Phineus. They no sooner did so than the Harpies were seen darting upon the table, but swifter still, Zetes and Calais rushed between and drove them back with a flapping of their bright wings. The Harpies fled shrieking, pursued by those winged brethren over hill and dale, and the north wind blew a fierce gale to speed his sons along, till on a desolate mountain they overtook the monsters, and drew their swords to slay them. But Zeus sent Iris, his messenger who rides upon the rainbow, to forbid them, because the Harpies were ministers of his vengeance upon sinners, and she commanded Zetes and Calais to put up their swords, and take an oath from them never more to come near Phineus. So the women-headed creatures swore it with human voice, by the great oath that binds the immortal gods, even by the water of Styx, that icy stream which flows from earth into the nether world. And the sons of the north wind flew back to the Argo. Now when they had bidden Phineus farewell, the heroes sailed along the strait to its opening into another sea, stormy and cold, where never ship had sailed before. For at the mouth of the strait 2 steep cliffs made a gateway, and they were alive, and whatever passed between them they crushed to pieces, clashing suddenly together upon it. But the comrades were forewarned by Phineus of this dreadful place, and having cast anchor before it, they went ashore, and built an altar of stones, and sacrificed a bull to Poseidon, god of mariners, with prayers for aid. And Hera, in her love to Jason, prevailed with Poseidon to grant them safe passage through those gates that he had set up to keep mortals from the northern sea. And she came herself to the ship in the likeness of a damsel, carrying a white dove. "Hail, Jason," she said, "a friend sends you this bird, even she whom you met by the ford of the stream, and bids you let it loose from Argo's prow. Then, when you see it pass between the clashing cliffs, let your comrades row forward at their utmost speed." With that she vanished, and Jason, glad at heart, bade his comrades bend to their oars and let go the dove. Straight through the pass she flew, and the cliffs closed upon her with a roar like thunder. But by Hera's grace she sped between so swiftly that only her tail feathers were caught. Then, as the rocks rolled back with a grinding noise, Argo's crew rowed onward for their lives, and brought the good ship through by a hair's breadth. The clashing cliffs met again that same instant, but too late. And that was the end of them, for their doom was, if ever they missed their prey, to dash each other to powder. Poseidon, at Hera's entreaty, calmed the northern deep for those first voyages, and with a fair wind ever behind them, they came at last in sight of the low misty shores of an unknown land. It was towards evening, when they drew near and saw at hand the mouth of a broad river that flowed between dark woods of beech and pine, and there, in a creek of the spreading stream, they moored their ship for the night. End of section 12.